Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Prabha. I'm part of the Seattle chapter of Ladies That UX. Welcome to Land That Role, Ask a Recruiter. This event is being hosted by the UX Researchers Guild in partnership with Ladies That UX Seattle and is moderated by Helen Lin. I want to start by thanking our panelists, Jeff Claff and Mandy Safstrom, for sharing their time and expertise with us today. We're grateful to have you. For those of you who aren't familiar with Ladies That UX, we're a volunteer-led global organization that is focused on fostering a supportive and inclusive community for women and gender minorities in UX. We have about 25 chapters across North America and about 90 worldwide. Our mission is to create space for learning, connection, and collaboration. You could follow us on LinkedIn for updates on our upcoming events and offerings, and do reach out to us if you're interested in volunteering with us. I'll drop some links in the chat.
Thanks, Prabha. The Guild appreciates the partnership with Ladies at UX Seattle to make this event possible today. Now, I'd like to introduce our special panelists today. First up, Jeff. Jeff Claff is a leader in UX staffing with over 20 years of experience in recruiting and connecting top-tier talent to coveted jobs in tech and healthcare. Currently, as the People Operations Manager for User Research International, he provides comprehensive staffing solutions to industry-leading companies. And now for Mandy. Over 6 years, Mandy Safstrom has helped grow OnX from just over 100 to more than 450 team members, recruiting across nearly every function. She specializes in product management and product design recruitment, leads community and connection events for OnX's Seattle Remote Hub, and is a certified Crucial Conversations trainer. Now, before we jump into the questions that the audience pre-submitted, I wanted to share that we received about 80 or so questions that we needed to pare down and summarize for this session. Because we do have a broad audience today, which includes researchers, designers, re-ops, design ops, and research and design managers from varying levels of junior to 15 plus years of experience, we're going to prioritize questions that are harder to Google that we feel would be most helpful to a broad audience. So because we won't be able to get to every great question that was submitted, I also prepared a brief resource doc that we'll share in the chat. Alrighty, I think that without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, so Mandy and Jeff, why don't you guys kick us off with an overview of this is what it looks like when a hiring manager comes to recruiters with a request, especially at the point where candidates become involved. This is not well demystified online, so it's kind of a blind process for many of us outside of recruiting. And
yeah, I can start with that. Yeah. Typically what happens, it's just based on need. So just to kind of give you a little background myself. So I hire not only for URI, I do most of my hiring actually for my clients. So typically what it comes down to is they'll reach out to me with a specific need, and it could mean they need a junior, mid-level, or senior researcher. And they'll tell me specifically which domain they would like the person to have some background in. And when I do my search, that is primarily the resumes that I'll be looking for just to help the client.
And my like process looks a little bit different, given that I'm an in-house recruiter at OnX, so I hire for just OnX. And ultimately, we usually get a formal request from a hiring manager as kind of the kickstart to our process. It usually gives information to our team of 3 full-time recruiters, what level is needed, and we have like 6 different levels that help us determine right level of experience, compensation range that's appropriate. And so we determine what level we're going to hire for. And then we look at a global compensation benchmarking tool to determine the competitive fair compensation range, which we'll post on a job. So any job description would have that. And then there's like an internal approval process before we post. And we'll generally post that to a few different places and advertise on LinkedIn. And then most of our candidates are direct applicants right now, but we will also look within our applicant tracking system, CRM. So anybody who's applied to a past role might be found and reached out to. There's also a general consideration application that people can share their resume with us, even if we don't have a role. And so we can look in there. And so through that, and then also looking at LinkedIn profiles, we'll usually reach out to some people directly who seem to have, the exact match of what we're looking for, as best as we can tell. I guess the other, and tell me if I'm speaking too long, I don't want to take too much time here. But the other thing I would say is that, for a role that gets like 400 to 500 applicants, I'll probably talk to 16 to 20 of them or so. And then, I would say about half of those will move forward to the hiring manager interview. And then we have a third stage usually for user research or product design roles that involves conversations with the rest of the team.
Yeah, and that's pretty typical. Typically, if it's about 5% of the resumes that we get, I'll talk to. And it's the same for us too. So I know doesn't seem like a lot, but we really are trying to fit the right person for the right role.
It sounds like specificity is really important in the job market right now. And since we won't go into detail about what the recruiter version of LinkedIn looks like, I actually have a link from a recent talk that I saw on LinkedIn for Ellen to share in the chat for you guys. There was a talk with somebody who works at LinkedIn and somebody who is a former recruiter, now like resume career coach, who demystifies like how to optimize your LinkedIn profile. And then about 30 minutes into that session, they show what the recruiter view of LinkedIn looks like. And that helps you understand like why it's so important to stand out by just maximizing the space that you're given on LinkedIn to show recruiters that you're the candidate that they're looking for. So definitely check out that recording. It's a great supplement to this event. All right. Okay, well, let's see. Do recruiters partner closely with the hiring manager when evaluating the actual candidate? Because you're sort of the first stage.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The way I do it, just because I'm not a UX researcher, but I work primarily with UX researchers. And for me to get a really understanding of if this is the right person for this position, I tend to work directly with the hiring manager just to make sure that they can vet this person, make sure that the skills meet who they say they are. I mean, I've only hired UX researchers. I've never done the UX research, so I like to work directly with the hiring manager in a collaboration with them to make that decision. Now, in terms of sourcing, I tend to do that on my own. And I sometimes I'll share resumes with hiring managers, but for the most part, I don't, just because of everyone's bandwidth.
That makes
Yeah,
perfect.
I similarly work very closely with my hiring managers. We are very, very closely connected, especially when we first launch a role, because there's a certain amount of calibration that we're doing to make sure that, as we're reviewing resumes together, we're both, looking for the same things, and I understand exactly what they need from this hire. And then, sometimes like tooling, for example, like we use Figma, maybe that's not required, but there's similar things out there, for example, that are relevant and we would consider. And those are things that I want to make sure that I understand from their perspective. And then, we will have like a weekly one-to-one where we'll kind of talk through interviews. And ultimately, my hiring manager is the decider on how people advance and who makes it to the end of the process. But we are working, we're communicating with each other every day and meeting weekly to talk about candidates that are in the process.
That makes sense. It sounds like recruiters almost play both sides of the field a little bit in that once you've selected the people that you think are going to be the right candidates, you're hoping that they succeed, that you don't necessarily have to go back to the drawing board and start the process again. So um, when a candidate is like in your bucket, they should listen to the advice that you are giving them on the best ways to succeed once they proceed. But then at the same time, you want to make sure the right person gets hired so that the hiring manager is pleased and is able to finish or get whatever job done needs to be done. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I mean, for me, especially since I'm hiring contractors for big tech companies, if they fail, I have to then fill that position right away, right? So I'm always looking for a person I could place with a client. The client's going to be happy with them, and we can keep, in the ideal, in terms of just in my business is to get as many renewals as possible. So we want to put the right person with the right team, and then we want the team to be able to want to work with that researcher for the long term. And absolutely, so it's when we're betting on the researcher, and we're vetting them too. We want to make sure they're the right person.
Yeah, and I would also add that, once there's a certain amount of like I want I care about the fit for the individuals too. It's a two-way street, right? It needs to be the right fit for the team and the problem we're trying to solve, but also, a good fit for like the candidates' motivations and what they're going to the environment they're going to thrive in. And so, I think I am really looking for like making sure it's a good fit on both sides. And once somebody does get hired, I have the the privilege of being able to root for them and cheer them on from the sidelines as they start to make an impact here. And so, I think that aspect of my role is really fulfilling.
It's amazing. It sounds like a really rewarding role. I suspect that many people want to know this, but like people don't want to ask. What might have happened if a recruiter ghosts a candidate that they were talking to? What are the most common reasons?
I will say that, at Onyx, at least, we make a commitment to update candidates within like a week of any step. And sometimes that's to say, gosh, things are taking a little longer than we thought. No update yet, but we haven't forgotten about you. That said, we don't hold on that promise all the time. Like there are things that fall through the cracks because our systems are, they're not perfect and we're all human. I would say, getting ghosted, at least from my experience, is always an honest mistake. Sometimes the email went to somebody's spam and they didn't know it was in there. Sometimes it gets filtered to like a weird social folder in your Gmail or something. So sometimes it's an email went to a weird place. Other times, a glitch happens where like for some reason emails didn't go out. That's a rare thing, but it's happened. So I would say like most of the time it's like there was just some sort of like glitch and it was an honest mistake.
Yeah, and also it's like with all professions, right? Like I really pride myself that I don't ghost people, but not all recruiters are me, right? And so for some recruiters may talk to hundreds of people a day, and you don't know how many people they talk to, and they're probably not great at getting back to all of them. I think it really depends on the recruiter
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. I think every recruiter, the way of operating or the amount of the volume that they're handling is different, and that creates a different set of circumstances.
That definitely makes sense. As a job seeker myself, and then also internally, where I work currently, I sometimes see like, buzz about a particular role, and then just a couple days later, it's been paused because, leadership has changed priorities or the budget isn't there, and so it's so disappointing, I think, to the job seeker. But sometimes it's out of the recruiter's hands.
It's usually out of our hands. I would say 99% of the time it's out of our hands. Um, to be, yeah, quite honest. So,
Absolutely. Well, Let's talk about the current UX landscape. What are the hiring trends? And I'll just speak a few like questions and you can answer to any of them that make sense. What does UX hiring look like right now? What skills are being asked for now versus maybe how it looked 6 months ago? Are you seeing more FTEs, more contractors, more junior roles versus senior, more quant versus qual? Talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, I will be honest. So what I've been noticing more is a lot of they're looking for researchers with some AI background, any kind of tooling, is the majority of the work I see. And then I also see a lot of mixed method researchers. And when they say mixed method, they're really looking for uh, a UX researcher who's got some qual background, but also can do quantitative like regression analysis, max diff, no Kano. So they're looking for like a real person who can researcher that's able to do both. And it's a tough find because not a lot of researchers have both those backgrounds. Um, so in terms of contract and FTE, I'm seeing a lot more on the contract side than FTE. But I mean, things change like at a moment's notice. I haven't seen a lot of FTE positions, and I'm not trying to sound negative, but really since like 2023, since then I've really seen primarily contract roles that have been open. It's just due to the current landscape that we have.
Yeah, I would echo what Jeff said in terms of what I've been seeing. I think, the reality is there are a lot of people who have been impacted by layoffs. And, I think that's pretty true across a lot of functions in the tech space, not just UX. And so, what that ultimately can mean is that you have more direct applicants for jobs. And so there's, a bit more competition than there was. And I think what I see in terms of like, applicants is that there's more openness across levels and scope, slightly more like flexibility in terms of what people are looking for next. Um, and I think as Onyx like continues to scale, I think we have actually seen we have invested in research just recently, and so I would anticipate that our continued growth would have more opportunity on the research side, and that could be in the form of contracts, contract needs, or full-time roles, but I think that's where, as a business, I would expect more headcount in the future.
What you just said about you're seeing more flexibility in, it sounded like flexibility in what those applicants are open to. But
Mhm.
is that possibly a mistake since we were talking just earlier about how important being specific is in the job search?
No, I mean, I think, like, how do you mean, is that possibly a mistake?
Oh, just I've certainly heard that the more targeted or specific you are in what you look
Oh,
for, recruiters seem to be able to slot you in better to a role.
yes, yeah. I think on the recruiting side, like being more specific about what you're looking for is certainly much more helpful for, us to find the right fit for somebody. But what I was saying is like on the candidate side, what I'm seeing as a trend is more people being more open to what they are wanting, and being a little bit less specific, and just more open to, a senior and a non-senior role. And that's different than maybe what I would have seen 12 months ago.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Jeff?
No, I agree with her.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that mean for people who are open to like different level of roles, that that's something that they could potentially land into versus I've certainly seen some applicants who maybe they were quant UX researchers, and so because they can't find the type of role that they want, they're also looking for data analyst roles. They're also looking for data science. They're also looking for statistician roles. So branching out a little bit more, but putting all that in one profile. Does that make it look like they aren't targeted? Is it a mistake or something that would flag something for you?
I mean, what I would really just recommend if you're applying for whatever role you're applying for, and sometimes you just need to have 5 resumes, right? So, um, what you really want to do when it comes to like your resume, you just want to tell a really simple story of what you do and why you want that role, because I don't know about Mandy, but I look at a lot of resumes every day and I flip through them pretty fast. And if they're not very clear, I tend to move past them. So if I do see people who have applied for quant roles that are data analysts or don't really have a quant UX research background, it's unless they can really explain why they're switching over, it's hard to really like it's not first it probably won't be my top choice for the first people I would reach out to. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think if you are someone who's like looking to pivot or try new things, build a resume specifically for the role that you're applying to.
Yeah, I think that what you said about, tell a simple story, I think really resonates for me, and that, I think knowing like what is the story behind your intention to make this pivot, that you will tell if you get an interview, but also like what's the quick snapshot for your application, and maybe that's something you tell in in a summary section on your resume. Maybe it's in an application question. I think it could be in a few different places, but knowing, what is the story you're telling of why you're making this pivot intentionally, is something that can really help the recruiter or hiring manager who's reviewing your application understand some of that. Because otherwise, sometimes it's like, well, I'm not sure if this is an intentional application for this role, or I'm not sure if this is just a blind application for this role. Maybe they just were trying to cast a wide net and this isn't an intentional pivot. So knowing that it is helpful.
For sure, because I mean, right now it's very easy to like put in a resume, it's like I always joke it's almost like not Match, but one of those websites where you can just throw as many resumes onto like an your Indeed profile. But I try to not look, we have to sift through them pretty quickly, and you can pretty much tell if that is, or we can make an assumption if that's what we're looking at versus one where someone's really put that time and effort into making a resume for that role.
I've definitely heard the same where people are saying, oh, I applied to 100 jobs per day, but then other people say, you know what, don't do that 100 jobs. Find like those one or two that are really the roles that you want, that you're the either the right fit for, or like you can tell the story of why you want to be at that company or in that particular role, and then put your efforts into that.
I will also add that with, the like with AI, there is a lot more like genericness that I see in applications, meaning, we may have several resumes that look exactly the same, in terms of formatting and even content, or application questions that they seem very formulaic in how they've been answered, and it's very similar from one application to another. And so because of AI, we encourage people to use AI to kind of support, them in their, resume creation, make it easier, sure. But that authenticity, I think stands out a lot more than it used to. And so that is another thing that, is kind of a shift.
It's good to know. I think, in fact, the most common question we received for this event was, how do I make myself stand out among these hundreds and hundreds of applicants, some who might be more qualified than I am? What are some other ways that people can make sure they stand out to you?
Yeah, what I would just like recommend, I mean, I know I've been on the job market before. I think I think really let us know what methodologies you're good at. I think that's really important, especially for research. I think, don't put everything you've done. You might not be good at everything. Just put the ones you're good at, ones you're strong at. I think put in, I think also for me, it's like I like to know where you worked, right? So I like to know your experience and what you did. And those are things that really stand out to me. I'd like to know, what domains you've worked in, right? Have you worked in on the more technical stuff? Are you more comfortable with consumer products? Like what are you interested in? What are you curious in? And then I think those are the things to me when I'm looking through a resume that stand out the most. And I would say some of the biggest mistakes people make, is if they'll do a resume and they'll, especially, not to pick on PhD candidates, but they'll put in they'll make it look like a CV and they'll put in like, size 8 font and they try to fill everything up in like a page or two. And, if I can't read it, I'm not going to read it, right? Make something really easy for a recruiter to follow and get through. Um, and then we'll take a better look at it. So, another thing to really think about is to, show your resume to your friends, especially people who are in UX research. You might have the job that you have, right? Show that to them. Let them give you some feedback, right? And be open to some feedback too. Um, so those are some of my recommendations.
Yeah, I think all of those are great recommendations and things that, I would echo. I think for for me, like what I often see is it may not be clear from a resume uh like what platform somebody has designed for or done research for. Like, for example, was this a web product? Was this an iOS app? Was this an Android app? Was it all of them? What platforms were you considering a user was using? That's something that, really stands out when that's clear. As a consumer mobile app company, we are really looking for oftentimes, and it depends on the role, but oftentimes that consumer and or mobile app experience is valuable. I think the other thing that we tends to make a resume stand out is like truly collaborative language. There are certain word choices that read a little bit more as like a pass off rather than a collaboration, meaning, it might be like a delivered delivered requirements to my engineering partner or something like that. Whereas if somebody says, partnered closely with engineer to understand, users problem or something like that, that kind of like collaborative partnership language is really valuable because that's how we work, and how we, find that people are most successful is if they really have this like engineering design uh, product manager kind of way of working.
That's new to me too. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll mention a very a facepalm moment that I had when I was transitioning to industry. I had one friend who doesn't know anything about what I do, but is in the business world, and I said, could you please look at my resume? All I know are people who have CVs. So she said, yeah, send me your resume, and a job ad that you're matching it up to. So I said, oh yeah, of course, sure. Here's the one that I have handy that I'm really interested in. And she glanced over it really quick. She looked at the job ad and she said, it looks like they really need somebody who has survey experience because it's mentioned multiple times in this job ad. But looking at your resume, it doesn't seem like you've done surveys at all. And I said, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I spent
Yeah.
7 years in grad school doing surveys, and I never once mentioned that that was my methodology. I only talked on my resume about the topics of the research that I did and who I worked with and maybe like some of the findings. But I never even called out some of those basic things that.
So yeah, that it is. That's how I see that all the time. And I think what you should really do is pay attention to the job rec, right? So if the job rec is looking for someone that does surveys, um, you know, does quant research, really knows quant research, put that, like and I saw someone put in the chat just a minute ago, how should I design my resume? Make it easy to read, right? So like I think if you look at the job rec, look at like what is the how am I going to attract the recruiter, right? The person sourcing your resume. So if it talks about, okay, I've worked in the cloud, like we're looking for someone who's worked in the cloud space, put that. Make that the first thing that we see, right? Because you don't want to like, it's also like, you don't want to search for everything, right? Just make it easy and simple. Um, and yeah, specifically, like if they're asking for quant research or have you created surveys, put that in there, right? That might be the first thing you write down. So I know it's a lot of work because you have to move things around for every single position that you apply for, but I think it will help you in the long run to get the role you want.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Mandy.
I was just gonna add like that, you know, I think that your story, Helen, really like resonates a lot because I see a lot of or we will create, you know, job descriptions that really heavily focus on like, you know, let's just say like mobile designing for like the iOS app and like designing these types of features. And you know, we will really focus on like those aspects of what the job will do. And then I will see resumes where I'm like, I'm not actually sure if like this person has worked on a mobile app. And sometimes I'll go to the portfolio and I'll be like, oh, yes, they have. Definitely. I see work here, but there was nowhere in like a resume where that was clear. And so I think having somebody else just kind of look at the job description, what's your takeaway from this? And does my resume seem to match that could be a really valuable like external perspective. And you could even use ChatGPT to say, what are the main takeaways from, you know, this job description? What should I make sure is in my resume?
I've heard that one thing that you are sort of allowed to tweak on a resume is making your job title more accurate to the job that you actually did. For example, some organizations have like generic job titles. For example, I was a health science specialist, but what does that mean? Technically, I was a research coordinator. And so instead of putting health science specialist, it's acceptable to write a
You
research
can
coordinator.
do that. The only thing is like just be careful because I do match your LinkedIn to your resume before I contact you because I just want to make sure everything is, makes sense. So um just be careful when you do that in some ways because sometimes I will see a position and then um I'll look at their LinkedIn and I'm like, it doesn't always add up. So you may just what you want to put in parentheses, health specialist and how it's related versus just to, you know, change it altogether.
That absolutely makes sense and sort of hedges your bets to make sure that it matches up to the background check eventually too. But also people understand what you actually did. I think that professors often have this blind spot because they write like professor or associate professor as their title on the resume, but then a lot of people who aren't in academia assume that professors only teach. They don't realize that there is leadership involved, there is research involved, there's, all kinds of other work that professors do other than teaching. And it's just lost for somebody who isn't familiar with academic resumes that this person has years of research experience and leading junior researchers or leading other researchers to, um, to like research strategy, anything that's like
Yeah, so I would say in those cases, just to highlight that, right? So if you look at the job rec and if that's what they're requesting or that's what they're looking for, I would just highlight that as like in my top, at the top of the resume and just make sure that it's noticed.
mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There are some resume basics that people asked about. For example, let's try to answer these a little quicker because I got some other ones that we want to get to, I think. Um, Summary sections on resumes, yes or no, and why or why not?
I don't rely on those. I would say not necessary. The only time that that actually adds value for me is, again, if it's one of those career pivots and I'm wondering like, how is this person trying to position themselves? Like, are they intentionally making a shift from, user research to data science? Let's see if they have any context shared in that section. Otherwise, if the content is there in your, role descriptions, the summary section, not necessary.
And I kind of like it. So I think we all we all if you are
Yeah, and I think, it can for sure add value and be a helpful snapshot. I think I often see those summary sections that say a lot without really saying anything that wasn't in the
right.
the job description, or sorry, their experience section. And so if that's the case and it's just sort of a filler, I would say focus on adding more content to what you did at X, Y, and Z rather than adding that summary.
I think though, like if you're gonna use the summary section, just use it, explain like all the methodologies and sorry if I sound like a broken record, but um, you know, put that up there at the top, right? And then maybe put in like the domains you worked in, right? Because you want to catch our eye really quickly, and then we'll look at the rest of the resume.
What about one-page resumes versus longer? We often hear you should stick to only one page, but what if the education and experience is highly relevant? Or if you've been in your working life for, more than just a few years?
I mean, oh, go ahead, Mandy.
You first.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm going to look at probably your first two jobs, or last two jobs you've had, right? That's where I'm going to look at first. If I really want to deep dive, I will. I mean, you can write a 5-page resume. I probably won't get past the first page, um, just because how many resumes that come in a day. Um, but yeah, don't try to shove as much stuff too into a resume and try to make it fit a page. So I think just look for a good balance. If you can fit your everything into one page, great. So
Yeah, and I would say I see 2-page resumes all the time, and I think nothing of it. If the content that is clear and it clearly shows like how you have done, work relevant to what we're looking for, I'll get through your 2 pages. But if it's really hard to read, there's a lot of words jammed in there, then I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to the second page if it's formatted the same.
Okay. What about matching keywords in your resume? Like we hear stories about ATS giving scores based on how well your resume has matched up to the job ad, things like that. But what tools are being used? How do we not get caught up in the trap of not having a resume that doesn't match?
Well, I would say like ATS optimized resume, generally, my understanding is means that it's easier to parse into the job description or the job application questions so that you do less work to fill stuff out. And so, ultimately, like a human is still going to review your resume, your application, regardless of if, your resume is ATS optimized or not. I think there are tools out there that help like scrub applications for the main requirements that you are looking for in the role, but ultimately that just like stack ranks them, and a human still has to go in and review them and make sure that's right, and makes the decisions. It's really just helping you figure out what order to look through them, but a human still looks through all of them. I think the key is like make sure that if the job description says they're looking for somebody with, native mobile app design experience or whatever. I just keep using that example because it's top of mind. Make sure that it's clear that you have that experience, and that's what matters most for me.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, this is very helpful. Let's talk about possible stigma on resumes. You guys mentioned that you've seen a lot of contract hiring, so that means a lot of us are ending up with lots of contract contract roles on our resumes or career gaps because that's how the job market is looking lately. How do people reduce this type of, is there stigma?
I love contractors, to be honest. So for me, there's no stigma. Usually, if you've been a contractor at a company, especially like a big tech company, you've probably have learned a lot. You've learned how to work. You know how the company works. You have experience there. You've worked with just very talented people. I would say I think it's really healthy to be a contractor in some ways because you may only get experience for a short term, but you get that experience. And so I don't have any stigma with contractors. And sorry, what did you have a follow-up? I already forgot it. I apologize.
No, it's okay. Let's continue this because I think Mandy might have something to say, and then I'll
Yeah.
ask a follow-up after that.
Yeah, similar to Jeff, I think contract work is great. I don't see contract work and immediately think anything negative about that. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's valuable because you've seen a lot of different ways of working. You've worked on a variety of, products or done a variety of different research methodologies.
Nice.
And so there's a lot of value in that. And I think, if you've had a contract and it's been extended, like that can also be like a good signal, like, oh, you got an extension on your contract. It's not a ding if you didn't get an extension necessarily, but if you did, like, share that, because it means they wanted to keep you on. And I think in the current market, there are a lot of contract roles and contract hiring. And as recruiters and hiring managers, I think we are aware of that. I think the thing to, if you have had contract roles for a while, the thing that for like an in-house regular role might be something that the hiring team is looking for is, how kind of embedded within the internal team you have been, meaning have you been kind of on the side doing work and then returning, whatever they asked for to the company that you've been working for, or have you actually been working with, the internal data team or the product team, and like how has that relationship looked? And if you haven't been, in that sort of embedded role, like awareness of like this is something that's going to change when I go, in-house, and I'm excited about it. I think that that is something we will notice.
Okay. Let's see. So how much do resume gaps matter? If someone's been out of work, how can they kind of get past that? Are there ways they can fill the career gap in a meaningful way while they're waiting
I
for
mean, I don't know if it's really resume gaps are an issue. I mean, honestly, when I'm doing hiring or sourcing, I'll treat it the same, right? I'm looking for your experience. If it depends on the role, right? So if it's a role and you haven't worked in 3 years in that industry, however, you have 5 years working in that, that's fine, right? So there's no, I mean, I think it's kind of, I treat it all the same, right? I try to treat everyone's resume, if as long as they have what I'm looking for, I'm happy to chat with you. So,
Yeah, and I think as far as like things to speak to if you have a resume gap or things to focus on like during that gap time that might stand out to a potential employer is, have you spent time engaged in the space, whether that's like I was a part of the Ladies That UX or something like that. I was interacting with folks in the field, engaged in that space, personal projects or like pursuing things that you have been curious about but didn't have time to focus on when you had a full-time role. Like those things, they are interesting to us. And then also AI, over the last year, if you've spent time learning or thinking about the potential of AI application for, making processes more efficient or easier for folks, I think that can also give you a bit of a leg up, when you are interviewing, because ultimately folks who are in, full-time roles, they have been exploring AI alongside a full-time job. And the gap between like generalist and expert right now, given how new AI is pretty small. And so, I think that can be a valuable thing to focus on in today's world, to really kind of bring something new to a team that might not have that yet.
Mhm. It seems like recruiters and hiring managers also understand the current state of the market, that they are going to see people who have some time between roles or have had to take maybe a slightly different title or a slightly lower level role. For example, if you look at my resume right now, I had a 20-month career gap. 6 months of that was intentional, the rest of it wasn't. I was job seeking during that time. And when I got an interview and was telling the manager, oh, yes, I was doing an intentional sabbatical for the first few months, she said, I don't care what you were doing. You're here, like you look like you have the skills. Let's chat. She herself had been laid off and was in a new role, and she just understood that this is what we're dealing with right now. And I
Yeah.
filled that time with like running workshops for people and stuff like that. So wasn't getting paid, but was trying to help people and keep my hands in research and UX as much as possible.
Yeah, I would say like at least for in my sphere of reference, like career gaps are very, very common for a variety of reasons. And I think in the last maybe 5 years, like how they are seen is different. And I think that's a good thing. The pandemic created a lot of gaps, and I think recruiters and hiring managers know that.
Let's see, we don't have very much time left. Why don't we try to wrap it up? What's some advice that you would give people leaving today? It's certainly a sobering topic to have discussed. What would you give people to walk away with today?
I would say I guess be open-minded, right? I think just it's a tough environment right now. I think we all know that. But be open-minded to just roles out there. And whether you were a manager and there may be no manager roles open. So maybe go back, try being a senior researcher or seeing what else is out there, right? I think it's worth chatting with a recruiter, right? I talk to people who are looking for jobs all the time, right? And just I'm happy to help them, right? So I'm happy just to call people. I see if there's a layoff, I'm happy to reach out to people and see if, how I could potentially help them down the road. So talk to a recruiter, right? Build a relationship with them. You never know where it could lead you, right? And I would say a lot of the people I've hired, I post jobs all the time. But I usually end up hiring people in my network, people I already have a relationship with, and people who've reached out to me in the past, um, and I've had them already meet with, even though there wasn't even a job, I've had them meet with like our director of research, right? So I would say, oh, this person might be great in 6 months. We don't know. So yeah, just network, really network, put yourself out there. Remember, like when you apply for a job, we're going to get 500 resumes. So if you want to stand out, start talking to people now because you don't know, maybe in a year or two there will be a job open and there might be a position for you.
Yeah, and I would say like for one thing, make sure that your portfolio link works. Like a common mistake that I see is like a portfolio link that is inactive or just doesn't work. So check it before you apply, because that is something that we'll look at with an application. The other thing I would say is like uh, on LinkedIn, it tells you how many people have applied to a role. That number can look really high and intimidating and make it feel like I don't want to apply to that. But the reality is that is the number of people who've clicked into a job, not how many people have applied. So don't let that number discourage you. If it's a job you're excited about, apply. And then I think remember that like with AI assistance, like authenticity stands out, whether that's in like an application question about, why you're interested in working somewhere. So I think like showing who you are and why you are interested in a role goes a long way. And then the last thing I would add is I think as a candidate myself in the past, I assumed everyone sent thank you emails. Um, they don't. I barely ever get them, and it's not an expectation. But if you want to, you know, make sure that your recruiter knows, like, I'm really fired up after this round of interviews. A thank you email to your recruiter tells us like you're excited about this role still and gives us a solid signal of your enthusiasm, and again keeps you top of mind without having to feel like you're being pushy or something.
It also seems like it's also just you come off more professional when you do it too. So, it's especially when you're working with public, oh, this person's actually sincere, right? They're saying thank you versus people are like they kind of ghost. We get ghosted all the time. So, um, yeah, it's really nice to get that thank you note for sure.
Sometimes those little things are the ones that ultimately seem to matter.
I can also add a bit. I know we didn't even get to interviewing, so that's like a whole, I guess we need a whole other hour for that. But like when you do get to the interview, right? Really stand behind your resume because you're going to meet with people in the industry who understand the industry. So don't embellish on your resume. We'll figure it out right away. And so really be clear, you know, show us what you're good at, show us what you're strong at. There's so many times when people embellish and I'll be honest, I just can't call them back because it's just it's so blatant.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jeff and Mandy, Helen, for pulling this session together, for your excellent curation of questions. A lot of great tips. Thank you so much.